Hey guys, today we're going to be doing spark plugs in the M157 E63, and apparently Mercedes says if you do it wrong, your engine explodes. So we'll get to that engine exploding here thing in a second, but it gets even worse because these little boogers cost $25 each, but I'll also address that here in a second. So anyway, they're due every 50,000 miles, so on mine, I like to treat my car right and get maintenance done really early, as you can see. So anyway, let's go over here to the table and check out all the parts you need, and I'll explain how maybe we can get away with a little cheaper spark plug here. So here on the table, we got our spark plugs. In these two boxes, we have OEM $25 a piece spark plugs, and over here we have 8 Bosch spark plugs. So I'll let you guys try to figure out which ones are which. They all have the exact same part number printed on them. They all look exactly the same. All the electrodes are all the same. So the only way you're going to know that they're different is if you roll them. Now you can tell which ones are actually OEM Mercedes or not. So the reason that the spark plugs are so critical and people like to talk about using OEM is because these spark plugs need to be indexed. And I'll go into that more in a second. But indexing is basically making sure the spark plugs aligns at the exact right spot. So when people talk about OEM plugs versus the Bosch, a lot of times they're like, well, maybe they don't index right because the threads start in a different location. So I went through and checked where the threads start on these. But what I did is I put a little black dot on each one where the thread actually first starts. And as you can see, they all start in the exact same spot. So you can't tell which one's Mercedes other than the center one that has it pointing up. So in other words, I've inspected these over and over and over again. Everything about them is exactly the same. And so, like I said, that one's $25 and that one right here is like $7. So take that for what it's worth. That's free advice. So now let's talk about the other tools you got to use. So just some simple hand tools. I do like the flex head ratchet. You're probably going to need that. You're going to need a kind of a special spark plug socket. I bought these from Amazon. They're really well. It's a 14 millimeter socket instead of the larger ones that you're probably used to. It also has a universal joint and a magnet to hold the plug. I love this thing already so far. Then the other thing is just another wobble extension, about a 3-inch one. You can see I put lines on there. That is just to assist with the indexing of the plugs. And then lastly, if you have a spark plug gapper like this, throw it away and just get a real, indicator gauge and a real gapper. Now, they say these spark plugs come pre-gapped, and so most people don't even check them. In fact, Mercedes is very kind of secretive about what the gap is. You kind of just have to measure it for yourself. So I've found that basically they're roughly about 28. And so I just go through and I just check them all and make sure that they're all gapped exactly the same, just in case you got one that the guy may have bumped it on the factory assembly line or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, it's always good just to double check. And lastly, this is optional, but it's possible that these things can tear when you take them off. These are the spark plug leads. So I just went ahead and bought 8 brand new ones in case anyone breaks. If you're just doing it and not replacing these, maybe just buy 1 or 2 spares in case you break one. And then I also have 1 extra coil pack just in case anything goes wrong. I have an extra coil pack. So now that whole damaging your engine thing. So Mercedes says that you have to properly index the plugs on these, otherwise you will damage your motor. And they cite examples of like melting pistons and other failures and stuff like that. And yes, some people say that they are embellishing a little bit, but frankly, that's not a risk I'm willing to take. So I'm going to index these plugs properly. So what does indexing exactly mean? So I'll put up a graphic on the screen, but I'll also show you kind of on the car. So basically, Mercedes wants the spark plug, which here's the coil, spark plugs below it, to point exactly at the injector, which is right here in the middle. I'm talking about the open end of the spark plug, meaning the strap is facing backwards. And I guess that prevents that. They give you a 45-degree tolerance. They just don't want it to be pointed anywhere down here at all. And so that is the goal. So I've talked to a couple Mercedes tech guys, and they all say the same thing. They just take OEM plugs, torque them to 23 Newton meters, and that should always line up. The only problem is it doesn't always line up. And if you use aftermarket plugs or different brand plugs, it's going to be all over the place, and that's what damage happens. So we're going to make sure that every single one is. Basically, that's just double checking. If it doesn't work, we can move a plug to a different cylinder, or we're going to adjust the height of the washers to try to get them to line up. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just double check all the gap and make sure they're all set to what I want. We're going to be using just the regular indicators like this, and go ahead and just check them all. So one thing right out of the box that I found was kind of surprising is all the Bosch ones were gapped roughly about 26, 27, and the factory one was gapped at 28, which should be what they're gapped to factory. The other one, again, these were brand new in the box, completely sealed, never been opened before. One of them was actually gapped at about 30. So I'm not saying that Mercedes ones are bad. I'm just saying that that's why you check them. So anyway, what we're going to do is I'm going to go and set all of them to about 27. So I found the best way to try to hit that 27 is to use the one smaller than it. So this is a 26. Go ahead and insert it, kind of press, pull it out, and check. Now, if you've ever used this, sometimes you'll notice that they go in really easily. Other times they kind of catch and you're like, well, is it 26 or I'm at 27? If you want to know what you're at, just make up 27. If you can't fit the next higher size in there, it's gapped correctly. That's 26, perfect. It's 26, perfect. So like I said, the stock gap on these is roughly about 27 to 28. And if you're tuned, a lot of people recommend going a lot tighter. They'll go something in the range of about 22 thousandths, maybe 20. I've even seen people go as low as 18, but 22 seems to be the popular one. And just if you do it, make sure you use one of these just to get it in correct. Now, in the unlikely event that you actually go too tight, what you're going to want to do is you never pry against the little electrode. You'll break it. The best way to do it is take some pliers, put it on the end here and here, and just twist it open just a little bit. And that will ensure that no pressure's here and you don't, scratch this up or erode it away. And just work in very little increments. If you do jack one up, don't risk putting it in your car, just replace it. So now we have 10 plugs, 2 spares, and all gapped exactly to 26, so we're ready to go and install these. So as you can see, I already have the intake boxes off the car. I do have a video on how to remove them, but frankly, if you don't know how to take the intake boxes off, you probably shouldn't be doing the spark plugs on your car. But anyway, with the intake boxes off, we can go and undo all these connectors here to give us room to get the coils out. We're also to free up the harness, take off one of the cam sensors. So let's go and get started. So we're just going to pull the little clips back on all these. So now with these gray clips back, the easiest way is there's a little tab that has to be popped up. If you just stick a little pick in there and lift that tab up, it comes off very easily. You can kind of see that clip right here at the very top of the plug. Now to remove the coil, we're going to use just an E8 socket. I'm sure there's some regular sockets you can use on there, but be very careful not to drop anything. Otherwise, you're going to be fishing it out from the bottom. Now we have to pull the coil assembly with the spark plug lead off the spark plug. Now I know you can't see it, so I brought one over here like this. This part is in the car like this, and there's a little flat part here. There's some people that wrap wires around it. Some people can use big pliers. I'm going to use just a 90-degree pick, and you can usually pull hard enough to pull it out. And remember, when you're pulling it out, you're not pulling it straight up. You're pulling it this way. Spark plug comes out that way. If you dip your head down low enough, you can usually see it. Hook it underneath that part and pull towards the outside of the car. All right, so now we have all the coils out. So I'm going to spray some compressed air around the areas just so no residual dirt, falls back in these holes. General blast. Now I'll kind of get in there a little bit more specifically. All right, so now we're finally at the point where we can start taking out spark plugs. So what I like to do, it doesn't really matter, but just to check to see how they were aligned before. As you can see, I've made a line down the middle of my socket, both the extension and the socket. And so we can go ahead and slip these in here, and I'm gonna have the line facing straight up towards the injector. And that way, I can see when it comes out how close we were. The thing is, you gotta leave the socket on there the whole time. So go ahead and thread it out. These do have a lot of threads compared to old school spark plugs. So now you can see that we were kind of within that 45-degree thing. So there's the line where the injector is, and we're pointing up to it. So the factory plug was in there correctly. So what I'm going to do is, normally I don't like to leave too many open holes because stuff could fall in, but I'll go ahead and loosen the rest of these up, and then we'll slowly go one by one reinstalling plugs. So the next thing we'll do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and label these just so I can take a look at them. So this was cylinder number 5. That way we can go in and inspect all these when they're all out and see how they look. All right, so now just a quick bonus part. So I've always wanted to do this when the spark plug's out. I'm actually kind of nervous right now, but I want to put a borescope down in here to check things out. So let's go ahead and see if I can get this camera to go in there, how our cylinder walls are holding up. There we go. All right. we'll just kind of spin it around a little bit. All right, that actually looks really, really good. I mean, those cylinder walls look perfect. Well, anyway, that is a relief to find it looking good. So real quick soapbox here. You guys may agree with me, you may not. I don't really care. This is my car, you have your car. There seems to be two different kinds of ownership experiences that people have. One is they have a complete trouble-free, reliable M157. And then there's other people that have some kind of catastrophic failure, like either bent rods or scored up cylinder walls. And particularly, it seems they lose compression in cylinder number 5. And so that kind of, to be honest, it kind of worried me. I don't know what causes it. It may be the spark plug indexing, might be bad fuel, might be something else. But one thing that in my research I found, it seemed the common denominator is they all were tuned. And so there's a lot of people that have good tuned experiences. You know, I don't know. So when I found this car, I kind of went back and forth. Should I tune it? Should I not? And ultimately I decided I'm not going to tune it. So yeah, I have that race chip thing. I put the race chip on there just for the test of the black boost and the test of the intakes. But for the rest of my ownership, it's sitting in the box. So take that for what it's worth. If you're just looking to it, just be content. 590 horsepower is pretty fine. So either way, let's go ahead and get on with the spark plugs. Off my soapbox now. All right, so now it's time to put in the new spark plug. So again, what I've done is I've lined up the line with where the injector needs to go. So again, the strap is on the back. The open side is at the front. It lines up with this line. So the idea is we need to get within 45 degrees of straight up. Now again, Mercedes says don't use any anti-seize on these. I'll link the article here. Some people put oil, but literally Mercedes says just install them. This thing wants us to use 23 Newton meters, and that'll make it line straight up. All right, so we got the torque wrench on here. We're going for 23 Newton meters. So let's see how that goes. All right, so we're now at 23 Newton meters, and as you can see, the line is over to the side. Now, it looks like it's at the 90, but when I kind of peeked at it, it's pretty dang close to the 45. So 23 Newton meters on this guy is slightly off. All right, so that first spark plug technically was in spec. It was right at the 45, maybe a little bit off. I want to get them perfect. So here I have a Mercedes plug. We're going to see how an OEM plug fits in that hole. Again, always be very gentle with these spark plugs. I do like how these thread very easily. All right, let's see what 23 Newton meters does on this one. All right, so again, as you can see, OEM Bosch or regular Bosch, we're both kind of in and up right at that 45 degree at 23 Newton meters. So now we either need to make a decision. Do we go crank it down tighter? No, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is actually make the washer just a slight bit thinner. That way it'll tighten a little bit more. All right, so here's the plan. We got all our brand new 8 spark plugs here. Here's the 2 brand new Mercedes ones. So I'm just going to take these copper washers and just kind of file them down. So once they're thinner, that'll allow this to turn just a little bit more. So let's give it a shot. So let's do a little bit of investigation here. The stock washer, we're getting exactly 1.49 millimeters. All right, so let's see what happens if we just sand it down just a little bit. Now this should be like, I think this is 1,000 or 2,000. All right, so now we've sanded it down to 1.45. So let's go ahead and see what that does. So now if you look, we're actually about 30 degrees off of being straight up. So that helps quite a bit. So in theory, this worked. I'm gonna go ahead and do this to any other ones we find in this situation. All right, so attempt number 2, we've now gone from 1.5 down to 1.38. So we're gonna give that a shot. So while we could probably get away with just torquing this down and leaving it right at the 45, I kind of just want to make them all very close to perfect, you know. Might as well, if you're going to do something, do it right. So there we go. We're almost pointed exactly straight up at 23 Newton meters, which is exactly what we're looking for, right? So now I'll go ahead and stick the camera down here, and it looks like we can see the black mark I made on the spark plug is pointing almost exactly straight towards the injector. So there you go, 1 down, 7 to go. Cylinder number 7, it's hard to see with that camera angle, but the line is probably pointing slightly up from the radiator, so maybe about 70 degrees off. So yeah, we're not in spec at 23 Newton meters. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this one out. We'll sand the washer down on this one as well. All right, so now I've sanded this one down to about 1.25 millimeters. So let's see where it comes out. If you look at that, we are exactly straight up and down on it. So yeah, the sanding method is working. Yeah, it's a little tedious, but you know, what is it? An extra like 5 or 6 minutes per plug. To do it better than anybody else would, I think that's a worthy sacrifice. All right, now we're gonna do number 6. All right, so now this one is at I think it was 1.25 or 1.26. And it is straight up. Perfect. And there we go. We can see the black lines right there, which is exactly on the top. Sweet. All right, 5, 6, 7 are done. Now we need to get back to cylinder number 8. So up until this point, we've all had really good access. This one is going to be a little bit tricky. So again, I'm using a 3-inch extension with a swivel head plus the universal joint on this spark plug tool. So hopefully we'll be able to get in there without having to take the extension off. So yes, you can just slide that in there just like that. I'm worried about getting my ratchet stuck, but we'll see. So I intentionally did not shove my ratchet all the way in there just because this thing's kind of hard to get out sometimes. Hopefully it'll get to the point where we're finger tight. So if we can just slide it right out without dropping anything. And there you go. So yes, you can get a torque wrench on back here on number 8 and at 23 Newton meters. Again, basically exact same story as the other ones. The line is pointing kind of towards the front, slightly up, probably around the 60-degree mark. So this one is kind of difficult to do. So I think I'm just going to straight to about 1.2 millimeters on the washer, and then it should go right in there. Just experience from the other ones. So I'm going to actually use a screwdriver to kind of pop the ratchet off of the extension. Obviously be very gentle, but you know, it should just fall right into place. All right, now we're coming up on 23 foot-pounds. Need to bump the camera just a... All right, so there, 23 foot-pounds. The line is pointing straight up. Done on this bank. Comes out. So again, we'll throw a borescope down here just to check cylinders. There we go. Piston looks good. Walls look good. Spin it around. Other wall. Sweet. Very happy with that. Awesome. So let's see if they automatically index on this side, or do we have to do more washer sanding. A lot more access here. In fact, some people said that this side's harder, but I don't know. I think it might be easier. We'll see. Famous last words, right? We'll see what happens when we get down to cylinder number 4. Obviously, I'm filming this in kind of an abbreviated way so you don't get bored at some of the redundancy. I don't know if you can see that, but that's only about 10 degrees off of straight up right there. So because I'm a perfectionist, I'm still going to sand that till it points straight up, but it is good to know that these things almost are perfect out of the box. Tighten this to 23 Newton meters, exactly straight up. Cylinder number 2. I've already sanded this one down. Again, looks perfect. In fact, we may have gone a little bit too far in this one. It's about 5 degrees past top dead center. We'll verify that with a camera though. All right, cylinder number 3 now. This one got shaved down to just 1.42 millimeters. And again, 23 Newton meters, it's pointing straight up. One more to go. That will be the maybe the hardest one. Cylinder number 4 back there. All right, so cylinder number 4. So again, this piece seems to have plenty of bendability. So let this harness out of the way. Again, be very gentle. Don't want to crack any porcelain or get our tool stuck. So there we go. Slides right into place. I'm going to use kind of the same technique I did on the other side, where I'm not really going to hook this in. although it just went all the way in, whatever. So I'm just going to loosen it until we get to the point of it being finger tight. Now, one cool thing about this ratchet, and a curse, is like I said, it doesn't really come off very well, so we're going to use a screwdriver. There we go. There we go. New plug ready to go in, so we're going to get kind of our full bend here. Again, goal is to be very gentle. Don't want to damage a plug, because then you're going to into place very easily. I'm just kind of holding my finger on the end and turning it with the hand. Thank God all of these have been very easy to finger tighten. If you had to ratchet these down, I mean, it's like, what, 50 turns to get them in? It'd take forever. All right, come on, 23 Newton meters. There it is. Can't see that line. It's straight up. All right, so now we have successfully done all 8 spark plugs. They are all pointing within probably 5 degrees of the injector. I'm more than happy. So again, I'm going to back it up by using the camera just to make sure. All right, so we got all the spark plugs out. They've all been inspected. They all look good. All the gap was good on them. Here are just the numbers I used. I found pretty good consistency here. Basically 1¼ millimeters ish did the 567 8 bank. And then over here, basically, you know, 1.4, 1.3, kind of in that range did it. So all of them required that amount of sanding, and that made them go straight up. So I was actually pretty happy with the Bosch plugs as compared to the OEM Bosch plugs. Anyway, that moves us on to the coils. Like I said, this part is optional. You don't have to replace these, but I already have a bunch of them, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace all of them. The only thing you really do need to do is get some dielectric grease and just grease the inside of the boot just a little bit, and that way they'll slide on all the way and be able to remove in the future. All you got to do to replace the boots, there is a little bit of a lip right here, and you just kind of got to break the seal, and then usually you could just kind of pull it past the lip with minimal effort. Now we can just take one of these brand new ones, slide it on there. Just make sure it gets fully seated over the lip. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of dielectric grease in here. Nothing crazy, but just enough that they're lubed enough to go on. 1 done, 7 to go. Now with the new spark plug leads and dielectric grease installed, we can go ahead and install our coils back onto the car. So in theory, with the grease on there, they should go onto the spark plugs and slide all the way down much easier and get a full seat. Now just finish installing all the E8 hardware. I'll use the 1/4-inch ratchet to kind of finish all these off. Now we can just reinstall our harness. Make sure they firmly click all the way in, and the safety clip. Now we can reinstall the sound deadening on its pegs. There's 2 pegs down here at the bottom. Again, we'll bring the 4 coils back over here. And by the way, these are the little clips that you need to attach the sound deadening on. There's 2, one here and one here. And they kind of just snap onto the bottom of the aluminum coil bases. Now the intake boxes can go back on. Don't forget to install your sensors. All right, spark plugs are done, so time to go start it. Hopefully it doesn't blow up.